January 9, 1975 was an historic day for electric cooperative employees in Missouri. That was the day the Missouri Electric Cooperatives Employees Credit Union came into existence. 50 years later, the movers and shakers who got the credit union off the ground gathered in Jefferson City to share the story of how it came to be.
It was Frank that really introduced the idea and got the idea planted in some of the guys that were movers and shakers, and it grew from there.
People had experience with credit unions from somewhere else, so they why don't we have one? And there was a lot of talk. It took, I'd say, 4 or 5 years before we ever got it passed. There was resistance to it, and there was skepticism, as in anything. I don't care what you try anywhere with your church group or school or with it, people are going to resist it. I was the assistant manager here. A.C. Burroughs was the manager. And I kept pushing him because I was getting pushed from other people, Vernon being one of them. And one day they had an executive board meeting here, and then AC came into my office. He said, "Well, you finally got it." I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, they passed you can get your credit union started." I said, "Well, that's great news, AC." I said, "How much money did they put in there?" "What money?" There was no money in there. AC, my boss, really didn't believe in it, and I talked about the skepticism at first. It was deep. I mean, and you don't have to wonder why. Somebody could approach you today and say, "You want to put some money in this credit union?" "Well, when did you start it?" "Last week." MECECU was struggling too. We didn't have any reserves. I always looked at myself trying to raise money for MECECU as a guy standing on the corner with a tin cup selling pencils. I was doing all the lending at first, and there wasn't much to do. I wasn't very busy with that, but I had another job. But we would actually get loan applications in here, but no money. Well, you'd have to wait until we got some money in, and then it was almost like getting some money in and running to the bank and put it in there. I think Vernon and I talked, and some others talked, and said, well, if we could just get some of the co-ops to put some money in there. And we had one guy, John Davis, he would do anything. He has to. He was the manager down at Show Me. But he really believed in that credit union. We knew that. There was ones we knew that were real supportive. So I called John one day. I think Vernon and I talked about it first, but I said, "John, you're putting money in the bank down there. You're not getting much interest, whatever reserves you got. Put some money in the credit union, 0% interest, open-end loan, and if you put some money in, I'll call somebody else and embarrass them so that they try to match your money." John wouldn't like that. He no problem. He wasn't going to take it to his board or anything. He had a flexibility there with. So we got 0% open loan. And then I called Kurt Funston. Kurt Funston and John always had a little one-upsmanship going, So I said, "Kurt, John Davis really did something great for his employees. He's shown them that he believes in him and supports him. He put in $15,000. Not sure I got the number right, but, and Kurt said, he did? Yeah. I said, you need to put in $15,000 too. And I think he put in a little bit more. I hired a lady after a while. This was after a year. She was a bookkeeper for a tire recap store. I told her, I said, we need to get somebody to do some bookkeeper out there one day a week. Well, I can do it for half a day on Thursday. So we hired her and she came in here and cleaned up all the loans, whatever. But then finally we got Betty Bruton in. We built it up enough, and what really happened was they started going out to the co-ops, and they had to get the local, what do you call them now, local reps? Local rep in each co-op. And then, so they started selling it to the manager, and finally the employees got payroll deduction going, and then it grew from there.
I think the concept of a co-op and a credit union, pretty well the same, you know. Owners put money into the business, they controlled it, and I think that was an easy concept to sell. The thing that I noticed early on was apathy. You know, it's a great, you talk to a manager and I think it's great, I think it's great. I said, well, can you sign your employees up? Yeah, we'll do that. We'll put that on the schedule, we'll do that. Well, you know how that goes. And then Betty Bruton, who was a sales lady, a lovely lady that had kind of a southern accent, she started going to safety meetings. And she could really sell it. I mean, you talk about the refrigerator and the Eskimo. Betty would fit into that story, but she really was. I mean, she was made for the part. She wasn't so good as far as keeping the books, but I know several of us have come down. Jerry, probably you did. About once a month, she'd be off. I'm off $15 and I can't find it. I stayed up all night last night. Look at that, I can't. So we'd come down about once a month and go through it with her. We had accounting type people on the board, and we could pretty well work it out. But Betty really was a sales lady for the credit union early on. And something I remember to this day, Betty Bruton was the credit union manager, and we sent her to a workshop in St. Louis. And we expected a report from her on attending that at our next meeting. And she had one prepared. And she started out by saying, as soon as I got there, I headed straight for the booze. You remember that? And it got just as quiet. I mean, this wasn't Betty. This wasn't our Betty. And finally, Dale said, "You did what?" She said, "I went to the booths." Booze. Well, you get information and material and handouts. And we all understood her to say, I headed straight for the booze. You came to me several times and you said, we can't let this fail. Remember that?
In fact, one day, you know, I think we got a little comfortable with the dollars in, the loans out. And I told Vernon, I said, you know, this will probably never happen, but if we ever get $1 million in this credit union, you and I are going to meet halfway between Tipton, get a bottle of whiskey and some sandwiches or something, and have a party. Well, I kind of forgot about it, but Vernon did.
Well, it came up, I retired at the end of 2002, and I called Frank and I said, if we're gonna do this, we need to do it.
Yeah, we reached the million years
Oh,
back,
it's
but,
bad, yeah.
and Vernon, if you're familiar with the town of,
Oh, that's your picture, yes.
okay, that's in the ditch by Centertown, which is halfway between. Vernon said, come on over, we're gonna celebrate, you know, that, party you talked about. I get over there at lunchtime, here he is down in the ditch, he's got a card table set up. He didn't have a bottle of whiskey, but he had a bottle of good wine.
I think it was great. It was grape juice.
And so we're sitting there, and people going by wondering what is Oh yeah, we had fun.
You know, I remember distinctly Gibby Hilkemeyer coming into this office and saying he had a stack of memberships. And he said, there's 44 here and I will get the other 3. And I presume they had 47 employees. I remember him
Probably.
had that stack and that was a very laborious thing to do because everything was just done on paper and by hand.
Callaway, things went pretty smooth because Walter was a big advocate of the credit union, and he tried to sell it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the best benefits a co-op can give, with the exception of medical maybe, but it does help the employees out with their money.
Yeah.
Great deal.
Any business has a character, and you can tell it when you walk in. And when you walk in here, you're welcome and everybody's happy. And so I congratulate the board of directors through the years, supervisory committees, and especially those local reps. The services that this credit union provides, and then the reserves they've got built up, and the percentage of employees that are members of it, the loyalty to it, there's nothing like it anywhere.
Right.
So, number one.
Yep.